favorite words are...
Favorite shape is a circle.
And this is a...
Normally when I take my quick glance at a new analog horror series, I can get a somewhat good idea as to what to expect going forward. That's not the case when it comes to this one, as I truly couldn't tell you what it is exactly I'm getting myself into here. I'm sure we all remember the good old days of being a young lad, turning on the TV, and watching your favorite educational children's show. Be it Sesame Street, My Good Friend Sid the Science Kid, hell, even these creepy bastards. Besides the last example, there was absolutely nothing frightening whatsoever about these programs. Pure, child-friendly fun. I doubt that's the case with this one, however. Guby and Friends. Sure, on the outside it may look like something made for your 3-year-old. Honestly, it looks like something you'd stumble upon on YouTube Kids. Perhaps it's a good thing the algorithm hasn't accidentally let this one slip over onto that side of the platform, even though it'd be kinda funny if it did. Each entry seems to take us through some basic learning, like your numbers and the alphabet. Thank God, because I always have trouble with those.
Uh-oh, I don't think I can solve this.
I was never good at killing.
Does this go here?
But I'm sure right off the bat we are going to find out what sinister secrets lie beyond the surface of this supposed educational series. Hell, it even says analog horror in the titles. However, this seems like the perfect recipe for prime analog scares, considering anything frightening being shown to us will already directly contrast the childlike nature of the design we are being initially presented with. As always, be sure to check out the original series before diving in over here for us to try and figure out what's going on. But enough yapping. I think this warrants some safety gear in case things get a little sideways. I'd like to at least get a good night's rest after having to go through this horrific experience. But before I let you get too far, just wanted to say if you're new here and enjoy what you're watching, be sure to hit all those neat buttons down below as it really helps support the channel. And if you want to see more, be sure to follow us on Instagram and Letterboxd. Alright, now you can pass through. Learning Numbers, 1 through 10. Episode 1. We open up with a classic kid show opening, where we're introduced to our main character, Guby, and he wastes no time getting into the teachings of numbers.
This is number 1. Then, this is number 2. It comes after 1.
There's honestly something already off about this whole thing. Guby looks straight out of Smiling Friends, and the screen is constantly glitching out. But that's not the purpose of today's episode. We gotta learn the numbers. Once Guby is done teaching us about the numbers 1 through 10, he goes on to tell us his favorite numbers.
Do you want to see my favorite number? It's on one of these. Have you ever seen one of these?
In a, honestly not very shocking, turn of events, Guby pulls out a credit card, and this is where our episode begins to take its turn.
It's called a
Credit card. Bring it over here. Can you read those numbers on the front to me?
Sure thing, Guby, I'll be sure to get right on that. A very interesting start to this collection of videos, to say the least. I like how if this didn't have all the strange glitches and obviously that credit card bit, this could totally pass as kids' TV. Clearly Guby has some ulterior motives behind the scenes as he really wants these gullible kids who don't know any better to steal their parents' credit card info. What's a little strange to think about, however, is what were they supposed to do after that? Do they just have to read off the numbers to the screen? Guby would have to actively be listening in on the child speaking in some manner to be able to get the numbers from them. Looks like there's some strange shenanigans going on that would allow communication to occur within these planes. But if that's possible, this whole situation just got a whole lot creepier. Learning Letters, A through Z, Episode 2. This episode follows a pretty similar format to the last episode. We get our intro, Guby introduces himself, except this time we are learning the alphabet. He goes through the whole thing one time, so I don't see how my kid will be able to remember this right off the bat. You're telling me I'm gonna have to also teach them? Once he finishes the alphabet, he goes on to explain that these fancy letters can also be used to spell words, and he is gonna tell us his favorite 2 words. What are these words, you may ask? Well, I'll just show you.
My favorite words are...
Help me. Please help me.
Just the phrase "help me" consistently repeated, and then he's very quick to end off this episode once he's done.
Now you know your ABCs. I'll see you next time. Bye.
Something that may have been hard to catch, however, is two very brief frames that flash on screen during the glitches, and boy are they telling. Our first frame seems to be a close-up of a missing child report for Michaela. Most of this is pretty unintelligible, but there's a bit we can make out. Michaela was last seen wearing a pink t-shirt and denim shorts, something visiting her grandmother. Authorities believe Michaela was abducted from the family room. The second quick frame gives us the full name, Michaela Akins. I'm gonna double check that.
Akins.
I was right.
And we can see the two photos of our victim. I believe we all can easily deduce who our number one suspect is. I'm looking at you, Guby. So somehow this haunted kids cartoon has found a way to manipulate kids through the screen, getting them to provide their parents' credit card info, and at this point, potentially fully kidnapping the child. Scary stuff to start out with, but I'm very curious to find out what horrors await us further. Learning Colors of the Rainbow, Episode 3. If we thought the last two episodes were cursed, just wait until you see this one. Our intro begins and the distortion has certainly been turned way up. Everything Guby says is also completely glitched out to the point where, without these subtitles, we'd have no idea what he's saying. He goes through the colors blue, like the sky, orange, like an orange, green, like a leaf. Then we get to purple, which he describes as a bruise. That's a little odd for a kid's TV. And I'm sure we can all guess what his favorite color is. Sure enough, his favorite color is red, like blood. He also explicitly states he loves blood. And just like our last episode, there's some secret frames that get flashed very quickly. Our first is of another missing child report, except under the remarks tab, all we can see are these sporadic numbers, which I'm pretty sure has to mean something. Sure enough, putting all these numbers into a few decoders across Google gives us the answer we're looking for. Hey kids, Guby here. Today we're going to learn about Andrew. I'm guessing Andrew is our new missing victim. Our next frame has a kid just sitting by himself on the couch, looking at what I can only imagine is the TV. Frighteningly enough, I believe this is the POV of Guby, or whatever evil force resides within, staring back at our victim Andrew. Our next, and more scary, frame we get is of the full view of Andrew Connor's missing report, with a much more realistic, haunting look at Guby, to which we are then shown Michaela's missing report yet again. Guby isn't looking as friendly as he used to, I gotta say. As always, Guby immediately ends this episode, except this time we get a little stop-motion cartoon at the end here, which also doesn't seem very child-friendly.
Here you are. Try one of these.
We don't want your sweet snacks anymore.
From the looks of it, we're watching a kid denying these snacks a stranger is presenting. Denying those snacks might have been the worst mistake of their life, considering it looks like they get murdered right then and there. I ended up taking a screenshot and reverse Google image search to find that this little clip comes from some claymation video called The Munchers, a fable, and it appears to be some sort of kid's animation teaching you about dental hygiene. There's this antagonist character in the short that gives all the teeth these sweet treats, which leads to the scene we are presented with in the episode. There's gotta be some kind of supernatural force that is pulling these kids through the TV, however, if I had to guess. If we remember the report from Michaela, it states that she was abducted from inside the family home, within the house. So unless Guby broke in through a window and snatched her up from inside, I have a feeling the only explanation is through the void inside the TV. Especially when we get that freaky POV shot of Andrew watching television. I have a sneaking suspicion someone was watching back. Learning Basic Shapes, Episode 4. This episode may be the shortest, but it may also have the most clues. We get our intro and Guby is looking a little different. We can at least tell what he's saying, however, even though his voice is still robotic and distorted. We get into our shape learning and he begins flying through examples. And while they start out as regular shapes, they quickly become a bit more randomized into various objects. Plastic lid, plastic spoon, car battery, broken light bulb, rotten egg, broken dish, little girl, used razor, and toenail clippings. Weird. Something to make note of is once he says little girl, we are flashed a picture of yet another victim, Sophia Anthony. We can then see another image resembling Andrew in front of the TV, except this time with Sophia. They gotta be getting pulled into the screens, I tell ya. Even when we get our missing person report that's very blacked out, Just the mere sentence, "she was watching TV," goes to further prove this. We get a little bit more information in the next quick frame that just says she was last seen in her father's home, and that no suspects have been found. In typical Guby fashion, he goes on to tell us his favorite shape. And I feel like I just had the secrets of the universe flash into my brain when he presents his favorite shape. That was a whole bunch of information flashed very quickly. So let's rewind a bit and see what we can find. A lot of what gets thrown at us are repeated images we've seen before, so I'll just point out what's new and important. We see this little orange dude who looks pretty funky, this guy wearing some freaky mask. Wouldn't be surprised if that's our evil Guby. We see those same missing reports flash repeatedly, except we are met with some quick text this time throughout. Do not look into his eyes. Do not listen to what he says. Do not trust him. He lies. Well, I could have told you that much. We also get a bit more coded messages that we gotta uncover. Our first little bundle of numbers translates to, "he is not what he says he is." And then our next bit of code is quite a bit longer. Panic surged through the children, their screams drowned out by the cacophony of his chilling melody, their hope for escape dwindling in the face of an insurmountable horror that seemed to have taken on a life of its own. So now we have two possible theories. One is that our man in the mask gets enough information out of these children to be able to hunt them down, and is also a very skilled kidnapper who is able to abduct these kids straight from inside their homes, even while other family members are around. Or, and this is what I'm still leaning towards, our Guby character is literally some sort of malevolent entity that is able to grab kids and bring them into the TV, where they would literally be lost forever, only potentially giving clues to anyone else watching by flashing reports of their own abduction onto the episodes. To end off this episode, all we see is some footage of what appears to be a desert landscape. Hopefully these kids can be saved from the TV, unless they were actually just kidnapped and killed and then buried in the desert. Learning about animals. Episode 5. Our episode begins, and this time our intro is heavily glitched out. We even get a brief frame of what looks to be pigs here. And in a shocking turn of events, this episode seems to take place right after the last one, where he gives us his favorite shape. Except this time, we can hear the child on the other end giving input, claiming their favorite shape to be a circle, interrupting Guby, which probably wasn't a good idea.
My favorite shape is...
My favorite shape is a circle.
Guby takes it quite personally, and we see in the subtitles a jangled up message that can be rearranged into "only speak when spoken to." We're then brought to even more text that seems to give heavy clues as to what exactly is going on here. I find myself consumed by thoughts of him, his antics playing out vividly in my mind's eye. The name conjured images of laughter and joy, of innocence and wonder. It was the embodiment of childhood itself, a beacon of light in a world grown dark with cynicism and doubt. Is this the creator of The Guby Show? It's now time to actually learn about our animals. We're shown a cat, a dog, a cow, but before Guby can tell us it's a pig, our smart child watching makes the guess and shouts the answer before Guby can get to it, which, once again, seems to really piss off Guby.
And this is
A pig.
This time, his text translates to, "Listen to what I tell you, pig." Jesus, Guby, that was incredibly rude. We get more text from our mysterious character. He was a manifestation of my own desires and aspirations, a being that willed itself into existence by planting seeds of creativity in the fertile soil of my mind. Deep down, I know that he's the one pulling the strings, weaving himself into the fabric of my reality until I can't remember a time when he wasn't a part of me. This character might actually be the creator of Guby, but not in the way I initially thought. It really sounds like this character was able to somehow manifest Guby into existence, and it doesn't sound like he intended Guby to be this malicious force out to kidnap children. We return to our classic Guby cartoon, and can still hear the girl that's watching the episode.
I love animals. Do you?
Yes.
Oh, that's good.
When Guby goes on to show off his favorite animal, he ends up showing a person, claiming people are animals too.
It's called a...
During the glitching, we can see yet another missing child report. We now have 4 missing children all at the hands of this cartoon menace. And based on the report, her parents had told them their daughter was alone in the living room watching television when a loud human, and then it cuts off. Maybe it is in fact someone breaking into the house and physically abducting the children. Our child interrupts yet again to say humans aren't animals, and Guby spazzes out saying all animals have teeth, which isn't true. Our character returns to give us a last bit of info. I was merely a vessel, a conduit through which this enigmatic being willed itself into existence. Our screen cuts to black, and all we can hear is coughing in the distance, and what also sounds to be footsteps. A door then opens and shuts before our episode ends. I believe it's also possible that Guby has possessed this man we are reading from, and could have him going out and doing the kidnappings. But Guby certainly also has the ability to watch people through the screens. Who knows? He could be watching me right now as I type this. Learning Things, Episode 6. This one is definitely one of the more out there ones, to say the least. For starters, Guby is nowhere to be seen at all. In this almost 6-minute episode, there is no sign of him. What we do get, however, is a bunch of jumbled up letters and numbers that appear at the bottom. While most of the text is white, some are grayed out, as you can see. When putting all the grayed out letters and symbols together, it comes out as the beginning of a YouTube URL. Then as the remaining minutes of this episode go on, we occasionally get another letter or a number that appears on the screen in different places. Time to get to work. All of that combined leads us to another complete jumble of letters and numbers, and if you try to add that to the end of the YouTube URL, it doesn't take you anywhere. Yet if you look in the YouTube's description, there is another set of numbers right at the top, starting from 1 and ending at 19. And would you look at that? There is a total of 19 letters and numbers in the remaining piece of this supposed URL. In the little bundle, if you only keep the pieces that align with this number code, we finally get a working link, which takes us to a brand new unlisted episode. Hidden Entry, Episode 6.5. Our episode begins this time with a flashing lights warning before we get our intro, and boy is it for sure flashing. The whole episode has Guby in the middle making just bizarre noises, as we get a bunch of images flashing on the screen. Mainly images of our missing children, and a lot of the previous images and ciphers we have been flashed already throughout the series. Except at the bottom, we get a bunch of random words that frequently pop up. And considering the beginning letter of each word is capitalized, I have a sneaking suspicion that's what we need to focus on. Taking all the first letters, we get quite the message. God, this episode is truly headache-inducing with those lights. Ideas are birthed from the mind. He let me in, and through him I let myself out. The larger pigs have less teeth. The smaller pigs have more to grow. How I feast upon the teeth. Seems like another message similar to that of our last few that were spread throughout episode 5, except a lot more sinister, almost like it's Guby himself doing the talking. Also, there has been a lot of mention of teeth throughout the series. We have the direct reference to that teeth claymation, then we have Guby saying all animals have teeth, and now he is feasting upon the teeth. What is it with teeth in this series, I wonder? We also have a bit more of those number codes littered throughout as well. Our first one translates to, "Where are we?" asked Sophia. "We are in a beautiful meadow," whispered Michaela. "This is not a meadow," responded Sophia. Sounds like the spirits of our missing kids are managing to communicate with each other. Our next message translates to, "Hello Joshua, come play with Guby."
No. Wait. What?
Something to note is that whenever Joshua's name is being translated, it comes out as Kashua. Might be something, but it also might not. Our third and final hidden message, which is a lot more sinister, translates to, "A sinister smile stretched across his face as he beckoned to them, the melody growing louder and more dissonant." Is the sinister smile stretching across Guby's face, or Joshua's? Matters would be made even worse if these kids are also being manipulated into doing Guby's bidding. There's definitely some kind of realm that Guby resides in where he is able to pull these kids into, and they exist in this weird state of being, it seems. Who knew that Guby and Friends would have so much code deciphering, but here we are. Learning about sounds. Episode 7. Our episode begins, and Guby is actually appearing like his normal self. However, not for very long. He begins to glitch out a little, and before you know, there's a new character in the mix, here to help us out in learning about sounds. I know the name of this cartoon was always Guby and Friends, so it's nice to finally get introduced to one of his pals, even if he never says anything and just sits and stares into my soul. Also, looking back at it, I think this guy came out of Guby's mouth. He literally threw up a new person. Interesting. We end up going through some sounds, and whenever he names a sound, the exact noise comes out of these little hand puppets. All the sounds we are presented with are pretty normal at first, until at some point Guby starts flashing in and out of frame as the noise of an Amber Alert gets blasted.
This is an airplane. And this is a...
In true Guby fashion, he goes on to play his favorite sound, and wouldn't you know it, it's the sound of people screaming.
Do you want to hear my favorite sound?
That was a pretty quick episode, but there were a few frames hiding some important information near the glitchy segment. First off, we have yet another missing victim. This time, Joshua Leonard, who oddly enough is the oldest victim so far, and he was mentioned in the decoding in the last entry. Normally the children going missing were more so around the ages of 3 and 9, but Joshua here is 14. We also get some more coded numbers to tell us a bit more of Joshua's fate. Joshua wanted to know more than he should, and see where that got him. Sounds like Joshua tried putting on the detective hat, and attempted to find out what was happening with these missing kids, and wound up getting taken himself. I wonder how far he got, and what he was able to figure out. The very last thing we see in this episode is another scene from that teeth claymation snippet, except this time, our tooth accepts the treat, and then seemingly glitches out of existence. The last thing we see in this episode is a very brief frame, where we can see there have been now 6 missing victims. Guby is on a rampage. Learning about foods. Episode 8. Our episode begins, and we are immediately met with some new captions. One in black that shows what Guby is trying to say, and the ones in white seem to take place inside this TV realm. It's similar to what we decoded last time, with Michaela describing the place they are in as a beautiful meadow, except this time it goes a little bit further. One of the kids just saying he's back. Then Guby shows up to ask them what they all have learned. They respond just saying they learned about animals, shapes, colors, sounds, and letters. Guby then just responds with, "Did you learn to speak when spoken to?" Before we then cut back to our Guby episode and can see a lot of our new friends have shown up. Other than our little green guy, we have 2 more friends. I sure hope our missing children aren't being turned into these things. We return to black and Guby begins talking about how much he loves food. That all living things need food. Even things like him. We then are shown a TV flashing static, with more cryptic messages from Guby himself. "Look into my eyes, my dear. Listen to my voice, little one. You can trust me, child. I would never lie to you." We're then very quickly flashed text that just says we are not the first. How many kids has Guby kidnapped? While Guby was going on about how much he likes food, however, we were met with a quick frame full of more text. "It is strange how vividly he appears in my dreams. He dances through the darkness, his form shifting and morphing with each passing moment. Sometimes he's playful, bounding through the fields of wildflowers with a carefree abandon." I don't think that's a real word. With a carefree abandon. There we go. Other times, he's full of hatred, his eyes burning with a malevolent fury that seems to consume the very essence of my being. We get another frame of text a couple seconds later that just says, "But now, as I search for him amidst the tangled labyrinth of my thoughts, I find only emptiness. It's as if he has outgrown the confines of my imagination, venturing forth into the vast unknown, never once looking back." The last thing we are met with in this episode is just the sound of static and heavy breathing. Maybe this is all there is in the TV dimension. Nothing has really changed so far in terms of what's going on in the series. We did, however, get a little peek into what life is like for these kids trapped inside the realm. Some of the kids, like Michaela, seem to have fallen into the trap of believing Guby, claiming where they are to be a beautiful meadow, somewhere you would want to be, while Sophia appears to be heavily questioning her situation. I wonder if this is supposed to correlate to those 2 clips we saw of the stop-motion teeth people. Sophia represents the tooth that rejects the sweet treat and gets attacked for it, while Michaela represents the tooth that gleefully accepts the treat and then gets fully taken away. Critical process died. Episode 9. Our episode begins, and this time our big pink friend is center frame,
Big one, take us behind those rocks.
Moving behind the rocks!
with Guby occasionally poking in and out. But the main focus of this episode is the garbled text we get yet again at the bottom. Instead of a bunch of numbers, we have to decode. What the hell did I write? Instead of a bunch of numbers we have to decode, this time we have letters. But thankfully, Google is a godsend. The randomized letters actually translate to something very interesting. Hello. Can you hear us? I keep seeing him flash into frame. I think he's already onto us. I'm afraid this might be our one and only chance of reaching you. As soon as he figures out what we are doing, he'll block off any and all avenues of communication. We're going to try to overload the system. We should be able to break through without his interference. Hang tight, sweetie. We'll reach through in the next episode. It sounds like the parents of one of the missing children was able to solve the case, and managed to reach through to one of their kids. What's interesting to note is that this episode ends with a PC blue screen of death. I wonder if some kids were accessing this show through their computers and getting sucked in that way. Most of the reports had the children watching TV when they were last seen, but it's possible not all of them were watching the show on their television, but instead were using their computers. Maybe that's how an avenue opened up for these parents to commence this system overload. But right when you thought we were caught up and done with the series, there's a damn QR code that takes us to yet another hidden episode. Learning about senses. Episode 9.5. We're back to a bit more of a recognizable format with Guby this time around, and this time we are learning about senses, and all his friends are here to help. Oddly enough, whenever he mentions a sense, the picture that is shown definitely does not represent what he's talking about. We even get yet another bit of code, which if I'm being honest, running this through all the decoders I could find wasn't getting me anything. But luckily, we got some higher IQ folks in the comments to decode it for me. You'll see Grandma and Lainey again soon. This is more than likely yet another message from one of the missing kids' parents. Now when I say this has a scene with aggressive flashing lights, I mean it. So we're going to save you the headache and move the text elsewhere. But nonetheless, this message we get is incredibly revealing. It sounds like we were semi-correct. Michaela has fallen for the tricks that Guby has placed on her, making her believe that this beautiful meadow that she is in is real. Luckily, it sounds like as of this moment, Sophia isn't falling for it. Would you believe me if I told you there was yet another QR code hidden throughout this video leading us to yet another secret episode? Well, during the scene with the insane flashing lights, there were 4 instances where a piece of a QR code gets flashed on screen. Put those together and give it a scan, and we're brought to this new special video. Secret Guby Entry, Episode 9.7. There isn't too much in this episode. It appears to just be a very old ad for toothpaste or even a whole dental practice. But it does fit the repetitive theme of teeth throughout the series, and the word missing gets flashed a whole bunch, clearly in line with our missing victims. I may not be correct in the slightest here, but I do have an idea.
I may not have a brain, gentlemen, but I have an idea.
I have a feeling that whoever is behind this ad about toothpaste or the dentist is our character that accidentally manifested Guby to life. There isn't much to point out in this other than the fact that this entry is all about teeth, and Guby seems to have an odd fascination with teeth. But that technically brings us up to date on this whole Guby nightmare, and I have a theory I believe is pretty sustainable. It's clear that Guby was manifested into existence as some living entity that resides in the TV. It sounds like he continually feeds off of that manifested energy that comes from people's imagination. He's basically a stand. Kids are pretty well known to have a much stronger imagination than adults, so that would explain why Guby is exclusively after younger children, only ever going after the teenager Joshua after he was learning too much. What does this all have to do with teeth? I'm not so sure. But there are now a total of 6 missing children locked behind the screen and being tricked into believing the world they now live in is real. Luckily, it seems like some of the parents have figured out this whole ordeal and are working towards bringing them back to safety, so not all hope is lost. The kids don't seem to be dead or anything, but just trapped in some other plane. I definitely really enjoyed my time here with Guby and his friends. When starting the series, the last thing I expected to be doing was cracking a ton of puzzles and having to put together a huge mystery about missing children. I really like how this series incorporated its analog nature into its story. I always like when the platform I'm literally watching the show on is the threat. In this case, the screens. Luckily, I'm a bit too old and my imagination is too weak for Guby to have any interest in me. Overall, while this may not be a necessarily scary analog horror, it certainly was an interesting one. The looming mystery of how these kids went missing and how it connects to this weird-looking kids show was really fun to try and figure out. I think the visuals were very well done, as you can tell this was 3D animated by someone with a good attention to details, especially when making it look straight out of your early kids TV programming. If you haven't already, I highly recommend you check out Guby and Friends for yourself. Maybe even show it to your kids to help them learn. Kidding. Or am I? That'll just about do it for today's video. If you made it all the way to the end, I thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to keep leaving me recommendations down below, whether it be through the YouTube comments or community Discord, where, just like Guby, I'm hiding inside your screens. But if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go petition that this series gets put on the YouTube Kids homepage.